Chapter 4: The Road to a Scientific Rationale. Here's the quote: Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. I think Bob Dylan said it best when he earnestly crooned out, "The times they are a changin'." In fact, I almost used that as my quote for this chapter. But ultimately, I went with Clarke's "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic," because that is how these times are changing, isn't it? Science is getting so advanced that it seems downright magical these days, at least it does to me. From virtual reality headsets to magical mixed reality glasses, science fiction has become science fact. I'm 35 years old, and yet I already find that more and more things seem like newfangled gadgets that I can barely understand. Just the other day, I spent 5 minutes watching a YouTube video, wondering why the camera was at such a weird angle, before I realized it was a 360 YouTube video. I sheepishly adjusted the camera to the man speaking on stage and whispered under my breath, "The times they're changing." And it's not going to stop, because innovation has been turned into a formula. No more need for generational geniuses. These days, just put a group of smart guys in a lab and have them use the scientific method, which now means giving them lots of caffeine, nicotine, and some low dose hits of LSD. And there we go. New, world changing inventions every couple of years, guaranteed. The biggest change, however, might be the realization that we really can't say what science won't be able to do anymore. Because so far, the march of science has been an endless line of moments when something went from being solely in the realm of "only God could do that" to "only God should do that" to "okay, we're doing that now, still not sure if it's a good idea, oh crap!" But most importantly, to this book at least, are the new scientific breakthroughs and theories that have created a yellow brick road of mind twisting possibilities that might one day lead to Fyodorov's vision of technological resurrection, a place far more interesting than Oz could ever be. Quantum physics. The first step along our yellow brick road is something known as quantum physics, or quantum mechanics, depends on who we ask. And if you've never heard of quantum physics, you should know that the famous physicist Richard Feynman once said, "If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics." So yeah, it's pretty advanced stuff. So, what is quantum physics? Well, I could write 20 books about it, and none of us would be any closer to understanding it, especially me. But suffice it to say that when scientists started looking at really small particles, they didn't behave according to the laws of physics. They weren't knocking around like bowling balls do. No. Instead, they were flaunting the laws of physics like little subatomic criminals. These subatomic particles and quanta like to do things like teleport through one another, be in two places at once, and communicate with each other faster than the speed of light, as if distance wasn't a thing. Something called entanglement. In fact, it turned out that subatomic particles were less like bits of matter and more like the X-Men. It's probably only a matter of time before we discover one with an adamantium skeleton and regenerative powers. But among all these experiments, one would have been of particular interest to Mr. Fyodorov, I believe. On April 22, 2012, in the journal Nature Physics of the Institute for Quantum Optics and Quantum Information at the University of Vienna, they republished a paper in which particles were entangled in time. And not with particles that appeared in the future, but rather with particles in the past. Particles that didn't even exist anymore. Don't bother rereading that sentence. It doesn't make sense. Because remember, quantum physics doesn't make sense. The concept is mind-bending and still very theoretical. But this idea of being able to manipulate particles in the past and teleport information backwards and forwards through time is not really an anomaly in the spooky mystical world of quantum physics. Many other papers and labs are also working on quantum entanglement through time and reporting on big, wordy concepts like retrocausality. A simple Google search on quantum entanglement through time will reveal a slew of mind-blowing articles about this cutting-edge science. And I recommend you do this so you don't think I'm making this up or getting the idea wrong. The truth is that there are many different ways to interpret all of these experiments. So, look for yourself. But suffice it to say that our concept of physics, and especially space-time, is nothing like it was in Fyodorov's day. Scientists routinely publish papers stating that particles should be able to go backwards as well as forwards in time. The future and past are now considered as real as the present. And all kinds of other ideas about the nature of time and reality are now vastly different. In fact, one PhD physicist, Ronald Mallet, is convinced that it is possible to send signals back in time, and he has been trying to bring attention to his cause for over a decade. Google him and look him up. So, what does all this have to do with Fyodorovian technological resurrection? A lot. In fact, this is probably the single most important concept. But there's more afoot, more steps to take along this road before our destination comes into view. Synthetic biology. Remember the good old days when scientists were still talking about genetic engineering? Well, that is so yesterday. Now it's all about synthetic biology, because scientists aren't just manipulating existing DNA anymore. No, splicing our tomato plants with roach genes to make them last longer in the supermarket wasn't enough for them. Now they've incorporated a whole basket of other, even scarier new technologies into their shopping cart of mad scientist stuff, like synthetic DNA, gene drives, and of course, those stem cell scientists are always talking about. Indeed, it seems like we've been hearing about stem cell stuff forever, doesn't it? But for good reason. Because what scientists predict they'll be able to do within one day is amazing. In fact, scientists believe that in the very near future, stem cells will allow doctors to be more like, lost a leg? No problem. Just hop on over and we'll print you out a brand new leg in a jiffy. Get all your skin burned off by accident? No biggie. Just spray on some of our state-of-the-art stem cells and be healed scar-free in a couple of weeks. Brain damage got you down? No problemo, mi amigo. Just inject some of our handy-dandy fix-it-all stem cells into your noggin and be back to your old self in no time. Because, in my imagination, future doctors talk like carnival barkers. Don't ask me why. And the culmination of all these technologies will eventually fall right in line with Fyodorov and Tsiolkovsky's cosmos vision of healthcare and a scientific utopia. Because, according to scientists, we'll be able to do all of the things these cosmos were dreaming about. For example, we'll be able to stop our bodies from aging. We'll be able to alter our genetics to fix pesky things like sickle cell anemia and weak chins. And eventually, we'll be able to print entire replacement bodies out in giant 3D bioprinters. And all this miraculous technology is far past the theoretical stage already. This is all pretty much guaranteed to happen in the next 50 years or so. So let's add the idea of synthetic biology and 3D printed bodies to our resurrection road and take another step. But we're not quite to our destination yet. Let's keep going. Mind transplantation. Mind transplantation, mind transference, mind uploading. There are many names for this sci-fi tech, but you get the point. Right now, most of the experiments being done in this field are still along the lines of surgical procedures, which revolve around the brain and nervous system. Because we're pretty sure that's where the most important bits of our mind are, right? In our brain. One example of this is the upcoming procedure by neuroscientist Sergio Canavero. He has caused quite a stir by announcing his plan to perform the first human head transplant, which in my opinion isn't so much a head transplant as a body transplant, right? But many scientists are already seriously thinking about the more theoretical concept of mind transplantation. Because just as it would be better to transplant only a brain rather than a whole head, it's possible that just a few trillion particles could be shifted from one body to the next, rather than an entire brain and nervous system. Theoretically, to pull this off, the particles within our nervous system that actually hold the pattern of our consciousness would have to be isolated. Then they can be pulled from our body while being maintained in an energy field, which might look something like a ghost. And finally, these particles would be quickly inserted into a new body's nervous system, which would have been prepped to receive it. What's most important to understand here is that this wouldn't be a copy of our consciousness, but actual physical particles that compose our consciousness being transferred, a mind transplant. And let's face it, this entire concept is very intuitive. Ideas like souls, spirits, ghosts, and astral bodies are as old as man itself. This is just a scientific take on it. And people are taking this idea very seriously because they want to use this technology as the ultimate form of life extension. They feel that if they can isolate the consciousness, pull it out, and move it into either a freshly cloned receiver body, a robotic body, or even a computer, where we'd experience a virtual reality, then they could do this to prolong our lives indefinitely. The 2045 initiative is one example where real money and energy is being put behind this idea. It is a nonprofit organization founded by Russian entrepreneur Dmitry Iskov in 2011, and their publicly stated goal is to be able to transfer a human consciousness into a robotic avatar as a form of life extension by the year 2030. And this particular idea has also been explored extensively in science fiction as well. The idea of putting our minds into a virtual reality instead of dying was shown in Season 3, Episode 4 of the series Black Mirror, entitled San Junipero. It's an exceptional episode and I suggest you watch it. Another example of mind transfer, this time from body to body, was also explored in the movie Exchange, which stars Stephen Baldwin. In this movie, in a future dystopia, people don't fly to travel. Instead, they send their minds across the country and into temporary clone bodies. And of course, the protagonist's actual body is stolen while he's away, and he has to go through some entertaining circumstances to get it back. And it's worth a watch. And finally, I have to point out the fact that mind transplantation was also integral to the plot of the #1 movie of all time, Avatar. At the end, the protagonist, Jake Sully, transfers his consciousness from his dying body into his big blue avatar body to extend his life. Now, whether we view this idea as science fiction or science theory, the concept is clear. In the future, science might make it possible to move our consciousness from one body to the next. So now we've got time-traveling particles, 3D printed bodies, and mind transplantation technology. Can you guess where this is going? I hope so at this point. But we're not quite there yet. One more step. And be careful, because it's a big one. And I'll go ahead and continue this chapter in the next video. Where we'll talk about artificial superintelligence.